You ever get that feeling that the world's most fascinating stories are scattered like puzzle pieces, spread across time, geography, and even logic? You pick one up, and it's about a lighthouse that moved. Another is about a coal seam that's been burning for decades. Another is about a rubber duck, and you think there's no way these connect. But the funny thing is, they usually do. The connection isn't always obvious. Sometimes you have to squint. Today, I want to share 9 stories, some uplifting, some tragic, some that just make you shake your head and smile. And right now, they might feel like 9 unrelated little curiosities. But by the end, you'll see the thread. So get comfy, settle in with a coffee, tea, or maybe a glass of something stronger. We're going to travel far and wide, and the ticket price is only your curiosity. Our journey starts in North Carolina, on a coastline with a reputation. The Outer Banks, a narrow string of barrier islands, have been called the graveyard of the Atlantic. Shifting sandbars and unpredictable storms have claimed thousands of ships over the centuries. Standing guard there is the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, a black and white spiral giant built in 1870, the tallest brick lighthouse in the United States. A lighthouse is supposed to be a fixed point, a rock in the chaos. But by the 1990s, the chaos was winning. The sea had crept closer, storm after storm, chewing away at the shoreline. When it was first built, the lighthouse stood more than 1,500 feet from the ocean. By the late 90s, that distance had shrunk to a few dozen. Waves were practically knocking on its door. Visitors could feel the ground shiver on rough days, the surf talking to the foundation. So, what do you do when the sea wants your lighthouse? You move it, not take it apart brick by brick. Actually, move the entire thing. This isn't a garden shed. It's nearly 200 feet tall and weighs thousands of tons. In 1999, engineers placed it on a system of hydraulic jacks and steel rails and slid it inland, slowly, inch by inch, for 23 days. Imagine walking along the beach during that time. You glance up, and the lighthouse is moving, not swaying, not tipping, just gliding, like some surreal magic trick. Workers in hard hats, radios crackling, bright vests catching the sun, the click-clack of the jacks, the metallic sigh of steel on steel, a giant chess piece being nudged to a safer square. And all the while, the lens still worked. The light still swept the horizon. Because ships don't stop sailing just because the land is rearranging itself. There's something deeply human in that image. The thing that's meant to guide us staying lit, even as we slide into safety. We talk about set in stone, as if that means forever. But stone moves, if time and need insist on it. We moved temples to save them from rising dams. We lift houses when rivers change their minds. We roll entire towns to higher ground. The lesson is almost cheeky. If permanence won't keep us safe, perhaps mobility will. You can stand at Cape Hatteras today and feel triumphant about it. But the barrier islands are always rearranging themselves, whispering in the surf. We were here before you, and we'll be here after. The ocean doesn't negotiate, it only postpones its plans. One day, long after the engineers and the tourists have gone, the sea will probably ask for another meeting with that lighthouse. I hope whoever is around then is just as stubborn and just as gentle with history. Now we head to northern Italy, to the year 1963, to a mountain that had a nickname, The mountain that walks. The village of Longarone sat in the Piave Valley in the shadow of the Vajont Dam. The dam itself was a marvel, a slender arc of concrete cupping a reservoir inside a steep gorge. Elegant, efficient, the kind of structure that makes you believe in human plans. But mountains keep their own counsel. There were hints, tiny landslides that looked like shrugs, hairline cracks where soil met stone. Engineers drilled drains. They measured. They wrote reports. The water level was lowered and raised and lowered again, the way you might adjust a pillow at night, convinced that comfort is a question of millimeters. On the evening of October 9th, the mountain stopped hinting and spoke plainly. A slab of rock let go, not boulders tumbling, but an entire hillside deciding to travel. Millions upon millions of cubic meters of earth and stone plunged into the reservoir. The water had nowhere to go but up and over. The wave that rose was taller than the dam itself. It leapt the graceful arc without breaking it and ran howling down the valley. In minutes, Longarone was gone. A map of rooms became a map of absence. Lights in windows turned to darkness. The after photos looked like the moon, grey, scraped, incomprehensible. The dam, almost insultingly, stood intact. A perfect piece of concrete bearing witness to a perfect misunderstanding. We had built beautifully against one kind of risk and underestimated another. It wasn't a failure of human workmanship so much as a reminder that geology doesn't care about blueprints. There's a difference between slow threats and sudden ones. Erosion creeps, landslides leap. In North Carolina, you move a lighthouse one patient inch at a time. In the Piave Valley, you run out of minutes all at once. Both are time at work, just in different tempos. Let's let the air out of the room and head to the ocean, where the world's most whimsical experiment began with a mistake. In 1992, somewhere in the North Pacific, a shipping container fell overboard. Inside were 28,000 plastic bath toys. Yellow ducks, green frogs, red beavers, blue turtles. Meant for bathtubs, delivered to the biggest bathtub on Earth. They didn't all show up at once. They embarked on their own slow odyssey. Years later, people began finding them. A child in Alaska turns a corner on a pebbly beach and picks up a faded duck with a chewed-looking bill. A walker in Scotland sees a green frog lodged between two rocks like it hopped there to rest. A Tasmanian beachcomber laughs at a red beaver, sun-bleached to pink and wearing a little skirt of barnacles. The toys were storytelling in plastic. Where they arrived told you where they'd been. Oceanographer Curtis Ebbesmeyer realized this was an accidental experiment, too good to waste. If you map the dates and locations of the finds, you can trace surface currents and gyres, the big slow spirals that carry everything from plankton to lost flip-flops. One duck in Hawaii isn't interesting. 100 ducks from the same batch popping up in Hawaii, Alaska, and Scotland over years. That's a moving diagram of the sea itself. There's a humbling lesson in there. We spend fortunes on satellites and instrumented drifters, and we should. But sometimes the ocean reveals its secrets with little smiling stowaways. The ducks also tell a sharper story. Plastic lingers. These toys were never meant to last 3 decades in salt water. Many did. Some may still be out there, bobbing between kelp and crate fragments, unbothered by weather that would break a boat. The ocean is a slow mover. It will deliver your message in a bottle, eventually. It just won't promise where or when. There was a similar spill of sneakers once, thousands of them tumbling into the Pacific from a ruptured container. For years, single shoes washed ashore, lefts without rights, rights without lefts. The world's strangest, slowest clearance sale. Beachcombers built collections of orphans, hoping to match a partner that might never arrive. And even before all that, sailors tossed notes in bottles, trusting currents to be their postmen. Whether it's a letter, a shoe, or a duck, the ocean runs a strange postal service with no guarantee of delivery time and no tracking number, but an uncanny ability to find you decades later. From plastic toys to a voice that doesn't exist anymore. In 1987, on the Hawaiian island of Kauai, a biologist recorded the song of the Kauai o'o, a small glossy bird with a bright yellow patch and a clear flute-like call. The recording is spare. A few pure notes, a pause, then a few more. If you didn't know the context, you might call it beautiful. Once you do, it's unbearable. The bird in that recording was a male calling for a mate, but there was no mate to answer. Disease carried by mosquitoes, loss of habitat, predators that didn't belong there, slow arithmetic done by a forest. By the time that tape hiss faded out, the species was effectively gone. That call isn't just a song, it's the sound of a door closing. Extinction often isn't a meteor or a bang, it's a candle guttering. The saddest part is how ordinary it can look as it happens. A green valley, a handful of birds, a research log that says, no response to playback. We like to think endings are obvious. Sometimes they're quiet. We give names to the last ones. Martha for the passenger pigeon, Lonesome George for the Pinta Island tortoise. As if dignity and intimacy at the end could undo the math that got us there. The rope we throw is made of attention, and it's always strongest if we cast it earlier. I promise, not every story today lives on the edge of loss. Let's turn to something gentler. The attempt to reverse a slow fade by inviting people back. Italy again, but this time to the sunny south, to Puglia, where the light in late afternoon pours like honey over whitewashed walls. There's a town called Presage, where, like many rural places, the decades have been unkind to the population. Young adults left for the cities. Shutters closed for good. The bell in the church kept ringing, but fewer ears heard it. So the town tried a different kind of math. If people are the missing ingredient, why not pay for people? Move here, buy an old house, commit to renovating it, and the town will help fund the work. Not a fortune. Just enough to tilt a dream into a plan if you were already pausing on property pages and daydreaming about olive trees. You can see the first weeks in your mind. A family from Milan, or Berlin, or Manchester, standing in a cool, dusty room where weeds have crept through a crack in the tiles. They talk about pulling plaster off a wall to show stone. They tug open a stuck shutter, and a rectangle of sky slides in like a painting. The neighbor shuffles over with a bag of lemons and a sentence in dialect, and you don't need to speak the language to understand the welcome. Hammers tap in the morning. In the afternoon, paint dries, and voices carry from a little bar where the espresso machine hisses like a friendly cat. Presage isn't alone. Gangi in Sicily did it. Sambuca, Ololai in Sardinia. €1 houses that are really €1 promises. You're buying responsibility, sweat. weekends with a brush in your hand. The value isn't just financial, it's temporal. You're taking a building that's late in its story and you're turning the page. A town that was drifting toward used to be becomes a place of could be. I like that trade. You give time to a place, and the place gives you seasons. From warm alleys to a cool mountain, deep in the Texas desert, inside a shaft cut into rock, a machine is being built to keep time for 10,000 years. It's called the clock of the long now. It isn't there to tell you if you're late. It's there to make lateness feel silly as a concept. The clock will tick once a year. The century hand will move every 100 years. The cuckoo, gloriously, will appear once every 1,000. The mechanism is designed for patience. Materials that don't sulk. Bearings that don't demand oil every Tuesday. Gear teeth that can mind their manners for centuries. Visitors will climb. They'll wind parts by hand. They'll listen in a room that smells of dust and stone to a machine that's in no hurry at all. There's a paradox in building something you'll never live to see complete its performance. Stuart Brand calls it the long now, stretching our sense of now so that it includes people we will never meet. The clock is part art project, part engineering challenge, part moral nudge. It says, design like your great 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 grandchildren exist. It says, think past the next quarter. It says, try humility as a technology. And because we've just spent time with a man made timekeeper, let's visit the oldest living ones. High in the white mountains of California, at altitudes that make the air feel thinner and the sky feel closer, bristlecone pines cling to slopes of pale, shattered stone. Their bark twists like rope. Some of their branches are alive, others are polished bone by wind and sun. One of these trees, nicknamed Methuselah, is more than 4,800 years old. It was already an elder when the pyramids were young. A tree writes a diary in rings. Each year, a new line of wood laid down. Narrow ring, hard year, drought, cold, some insult from the sky. Wide ring, abundance, a gentle sequence of seasons. Dendrochronologists, tree time readers, take thin cores from trunks, the wood spiraling like a cinnamon stick, and count light and dark, matching patterns across forests like fingerprints. With those rings, humans have dated ancient timbers in buildings and ships, corrected radiocarbon clocks, traced the climate's rhythms and tantrums. Bristlecones aren't the only elders. In Sweden, a spruce called Old Chico has been alive through clonal regrowth for nearly 10,000 years. The visible tree you meet is not that old. The root system is. The organism has reinvented itself again and again, answering ice and wind with patience. In Chile, alerce trees stand like pillars of time. In Tasmania, the Huon pine smells faintly of stories and boats. To stand among them is to feel a different pace of being. Not calendar time, not agenda time, tree time. Slow, attentive, unembarrassed by silence. Humans mark time with monuments and machines. Trees mark time with survival. You can hug a clock, but it won't hug back. A tree will. It'll rough your cheek a little and leave a bit of resin on your sleeve and go back to the long work of turning light into wood. I don't think there is a better metaphor for hope than something that photosynthesizes through centuries. From living archives to a vault made for memory, we cross oceans to Svalbard, far north, where the light in winter is an idea more than an event. Just outside Longyearbyen, in a former coal mine dug into a mountainside, sits the Arctic World Archive, a library tucked into cold rock. The famous neighbor here is the Global Seed Vault, a trove of future harvests. The archive is for culture and code. Inside, on reels of special film that can last centuries if kept cool and dry, nations store digitized treasures, manuscripts, treaties, works of art, historical photographs, pieces of software that keep the invisible plumbing of the internet flowing. Museums send high-resolution scans. Companies deposit snapshots of open source code. A kind of Noah's Ark for bytes. Without the boat, because the mountain is the boat. There's a sweet irony in using analog film to store digital memory. The newest things sometimes survive best on the oldest mediums. Ink outlasts hard drives. Paper can outlast platforms. The future, when it opens a drawer in this place, will see silver crystals that have been quietly holding their breath for 100 years. The person who opens the drawer might not know our jokes or our politics or our slang, but they will know we wanted to be understood. That matters. You don't build a vault like this because you know who will need it. You build it because you hope someone will. Preservation is a way to talk to strangers across time. We were here. We tried. These are the recipes and the songs and the catastrophes and the code. Please read carefully. Please do better where we failed. Now we head to a town where time smells like smoke. Centralia, Pennsylvania. In 1962, a fire caught in an underground coal seam. There are tidy explanations. A landfill burn gone wrong, a vein of coal exposed at the edge of a pit. But the practical truth is that once fire finds the right seam, it can travel and travel and travel. Underground fires don't look like the ones in movies. There aren't walls of flame and people running dramatically with buckets. There is heat where there shouldn't be heat. In winter, snow melts in odd patterns, as if something warm is breathing beneath the ground. Cracks appear in roads, and a faint vapor threads upward, smelling metallic and sour. Basements accumulate gases you can't see. The fire advances like an animal that has decided to move house very, very slowly. Authorities try to smother it. Trenches, grout, ceiling. For a while, the town lived with the strangeness. Then the strangeness got less funny. People moved, houses were demolished. Nature began to retake the lots with a speed that felt like forgiveness. A piece of buckled highway became known as Graffiti Road. Visitors spray painted it with declarations of love and jokes, as if to domesticate a wound. Eventually, even that was covered over, to discourage curiosity that bordered on recklessness. Centralia isn't unique. In India, parts of the Jaria coalfields have burned for more than 100 years. In Australia, Mount Wingan, Burning Mountain, has likely smoldered for thousands. Coal seam fires measure time in units that make human plans look like weekend lists. They stop when the fuel stops, which might be long after the last human has had an opinion about it. So, what ties all of this together? At first glance, these are just scattered snapshots. A walking lighthouse, a vanished village, globe-trotting rubber ducks, the final song of a bird, a town that will pay you to live there, a 10,000-year clock, the oldest trees on earth, a frozen vault of memory, and a fire that refuses to die. The thread is time. Not just the passage of it, but the different ways it behaves. Time that erodes a shoreline one grain at a time until you wake up and your lighthouse has waves in its front garden. Time that gathers stress in a mountain until one night it lets go in a single, terrible exhale. Time that ties Hawaii to Scotland with a chain of currents and plastic smiles you can follow on a map. Time that can run out for a species while a forest still looks green. Time that can be loaned to a village in exchange for sweat and paint and laughter. Time that can be measured in centuries by a patient machine inside a mountain. Time that can be read in wood and resin, ring by ring. Time that can be folded into film and hidden in the cold. Time that burns under your feet, outlasting deeds and fences and stubbornness. When time pushes, we tend to make three kinds of move. Sometimes we resist, we shore up, we move the lighthouse, we draw a line in the sand and say not today. Sometimes we repair. We put our shoulders to a town that's coasting towards silence and give it a push back uphill. And sometimes we remember. We put code in a vault and stories on film and chimes in a cave. Because memory is the only way to speak to the future. There's comfort in knowing we're not the first to face these questions, and we won't be the last. A mason in 1870 laying bricks for a lighthouse, an engineer in 1999 jacking it onto rails, a scientist following a duck on a map, a ranger listening to a recording of a bird that won't answer, a volunteer scraping old paint from a sun-hot bullion wall, a horologist polishing a gear tooth you'll never see, a researcher taking a tree core at 10,000 feet, a conservator threading film onto a reel in a room that hums with refrigeration, a stubborn resident of a smoky town watering a tomato plant on a porch that looks out over memory. All of them are doing the same thing in different uniforms. They're making a mark on a moving surface. If these stories leave you with anything, let it be this. Treat time as something you can collaborate with. Not an enemy, not a bully, not a clock on the wall to resent. A collaborator. Work with its currents. Accept its seasons. Plan a little farther than feels comfortable. And when you have the chance, leave a note for whoever comes next. Whether that note is a restored house, a well-kept record, a protected tree, or a story told carefully and passed along. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the wander, from lighthouses and landslides to ducks, birds, clocks, trees, vaults, and fires, share it with someone who collects peculiar stories the way other people collect postcards. Take care of your minutes today. They're the only currency you can't earn back. And I'll meet you in the next episode, where we'll pick up a few more curious pieces and see what picture they make together.